Okay, well, thanks, Gary. Good morning, everyone. Like Gary said, this is sort of a growing number of institutions and corporations are implementing sustainability initiatives for a variety of reasons. They come in all shapes and sizes. Some are just aimed at reducing organizations' carbon footprint or curbing waste and waste streams and cleaning up supply chains. But this morning we are going to hear about a different type of sustainability initiative. They seek to accomplish all these the similar goals, but they have a sort of a broader goal of influencing public opinion and trying to influence public behavior. And we have a variety of examples here. We have Fahmida Ahmed, the director of the Stanford University's Department of Sustainability and Energy. And she's going to tell us about the initiative that the campus has been implementing since 2006. And then we're going to hear from NRTC's Darby Hoover, who's involved in the sports greening movement, who has an amazing story about the greening of not only just sports complexes, but teams and how they're trying to use the sports sector to motivate people to change their behavior. And then Patrick Nye of Bonneville Environmental Foundation works with NGOs, corporations, and governments and educational institutions, deploying offsets to achieve a lot of sustainability initiatives, including leveraging the outcomes with the public. So Fahmida, why don't you get us started and give us a little rundown of Stanford's initiative.
Happy to. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming in. I've been with Stanford University for about 6 years now, and Stanford's my third campus in campus sustainability in this realm of higher education, and how it has approached sustainability movement is an area that I think about a lot. To speak more specifically about Stanford's sustainability initiatives, which has been there for decades through efficiency and retrofits and the various other, of course, the campus education programs, it really got started in 2003 with the formation of the interdisciplinary research and education focus, which the university administration, including the president and the provost, got started. And a few years following came the campus operational side of the efforts, the Sustainable Stanford program. And that's when the university got started with looking at our 8,180 acres, 40% of which is developed, really the academic campus and the buildings and all the operations, the backbones of the physical infrastructure that support the teaching and research mission. How can that be as sustainable as possible, and set that by example? So back to Carolyn's theme of how this sets examples for others who are trying to learn. And universities have this responsibility to show by example what is possible, a lot is expected of us. So we do look at sustainability in a very holistic way. There are three key initiatives that I wanted to share to start off with this morning. Is on the infrastructural side of sustainability, the three examples about energy, water, and transportation. So on the energy story, we are going through a lot of changes right now in our energy systems, and by 2015, which is next year, to us a while back, it used to be like, oh, 2015 is a while away, but it's actually next year. The campus is cutting its carbon emissions by 50% through the coming online of our new energy plant and system, and I hope we get to talk about that a little bit more. For water, which being a very important issue for California right now, we are, in the last 15 years or so, we have reduced our potable water usage on campus by 40% through various efficiency measures, conservation, behavioral programs, et cetera. And for transportation, the commute emissions related to transportation, they're already below 1990 levels. So the story there is very good as well in terms of all the transportation demand management programs and alternative public transportation programs that the university's undertaken. So those are some of the highlights of our infrastructural program. The other pieces that are relatively new is academic integration. So over 500 courses related to environment and sustainability are taught at Stanford University across its 7 major schools. And with all those courses, students are coming in learning, and they don't necessarily always get the chance to do practical experience, to take a closer look at what is sustainability as a profession, what kind of career are they going to have when they graduate. So in the last few years, working very closely with our various academic institutes and the operational departments, we're really paying much closer attention to how the research that's happening at Stanford could be applied also to Stanford University in its own backyard, so the university could be truly seen as a living laboratory. And the third point in my introductory remark is about behavior change. So we've introduced a lot of behavioral programs and campaigns over the last 3 years, we would say, seasonally, on topics such as energy, waste, transportation, water, procurement, and give individuals a chance to participate in them. So we have a campus where not just a few hundred people are making decisions about sustainability, but all 35,000 of its occupants really participate in it.
Okay, Darby.
I'm Darby Hoover with the Natural Resources and Defense Council. I think many of you are probably familiar with NRDC and probably listened to several NRDC folks at this conference. I work in part of NRDC that many of you may not be familiar with, which is I have a few projects, one of which is the NRDC Sports Project. This got kicked off basically in 2004, did not have an official name, but we started collaborating with the Philadelphia Eagles on ways to improve the environmental footprint of their stadium. One of the first things that happened with the Eagles is that we had been working on paper industry issues in the Southwest U.S., and we said to the team owners, the Lurries at the time, do you all realize that your team mascot is endangered by some of the paper industry practices in the Southwest, and you're buying that paper for your tissue products in the stadium? And they immediately said, okay, that's not good. We really want to adopt some sort of position on that and also just look at our environmental initiatives overall. So they've done a fantastic job. The Eagles have all kinds of great environmental initiatives in place. A couple other things happened right around that time at NRDC. One is that we started working with Warner Music Group, a big music label, to try to help them look at alternative ways to package CDs and work with some of their products. Now, at the time, we were having transition away from CDs into a lot of digital media. There wasn't a big opportunity to retool in the entire industry and get rid of the jewel case, which is really what we wanted to do, that ridiculous plastic thing. But what we were able to do was to change all the paper, to convert some of those jewel cases into cardboard packaging, and to convert all the paper that is used as labels for those into recycled content FSC certified paper, which in 2004 was a pretty big deal, and also meant that their producer had the opportunity to provide that to other folks who were using that same printer. So we realized in doing these initiatives that there was a real potential to not only do on-the-ground changes, but to essentially influence supply chains and also get messaging out in ways that maybe weren't traditional for environmental advocates. Also right around then, Robert Redford, who's one of our longstanding board members, spoke at a board meeting to several of my colleagues and said, you know, if we're really wanting to change the way that we communicate and change the way we get our messages out, we need to go where people actually are. We should be working with sports. So my colleague and head of the sports project, Dr. Alan Hershkowitz, said, great, let's do that. So we, since that time, have developed initiatives working with all of the major U.S. professional sports leagues. We helped form the Green Sports Alliance in 2011, which now has over 220 team and venue members from 16 different leagues. We're about to hold the third or fourth, is it third or fourth? Third Green Sports Summit this summer, all of which is a really exciting place to be, and it's got a huge amount of interest, and all of these sports organizations have been very engaged in coming up with strategies that I'm sure we'll go into a lot of details on. From our point of view, there are 3 big reasons we're involved in this initiative. One is the actual opportunity to make on-the-ground footprint changes in places that maybe don't have the hugest footprint on the planet, but that have a lot of visibility and can often serve as models in a community. and can often influence infrastructure in a community. For example, if a stadium decides it wants composting, they may have the capacity to create other customers or create an infrastructure where they get a hauler, and then that hauler can work with other entities in that community. So they're a big, powerful user in many communities. So on-the-ground footprint changes, the ability to influence supply chains. All industries meet on a sports field. So you've got textiles and food and waste and energy and water. You've got all these different suppliers and all these different vendors and all these different sponsors. If you've got the Red Sox asking for local food options from their concessionaire, that's going to go a lot farther, a lot faster than if NRDC just shows up and says, we think this would be a great thing for you to do. So it's a great way for us to help advise teams and venues and influence the supply chain. And then the third thing is the messaging opportunity, and I know we'll talk a lot more about that, but the ability to get out the same kind of messaging around sustainability and why it's important, but in a completely different way and to different audiences. So our ability to contextualize those messages to fans and within the context of sports, which is fun, is really something that's unique and fun for us, too.
Patrick, why don't you share with us how the offsets
Okay.
play into these programs?
So I'm Pat Nye with Bonneville Environmental Foundation. We're an NGO that's focused on energy, carbon, and water. We work with a wide variety of programs and initiatives and serve a pretty wide spectrum of clients and partnerships. Some of our work, and certainly probably how we're known best here in this forum, is our work with General Motors. In 2010, their Chevrolet brand kicked off the Carbon Reduction Initiative. This was along with the launch of the Volt and lots of other changes at General Motors, and they basically made a commitment to reducing 8 million metric tons of CO2 and set a budget of $40 million to do this in a 5-year time frame. They brought us on board to basically develop and manage their carbon portfolio. And so I know many of you in the audience have either put projects forward or actually are a supplier to that portfolio, and I certainly thank you for participating and giving us those great projects to help reach Chevy's goal. Some of the other programs we focus on are sort of a best-in-class renewable energy education program called Solar for Our Schools, where we're really harnessing the mass development of solar and turning that into an opportunity to go beyond just the energy, but also have that be an in-classroom resource along with teacher trainings and educational packages to really inform the next generation of energy buyers. And lastly, I'll mention the initiative we've taken on with water, where we're basically a partner in the Change the Course campaign. And this is designed to basically influence organizations and households on their water use, at the same time linking that to actually restoring inflow streams into endangered rivers and streams around the country. I'll touch a little bit on the two examples I think are really sort of the best examples of our work in sort of influencing beyond the boundary of just an organization or company, and that's the General Motors initiative. So as I said, they've been supporting projects around the country, buying certified carbon offsets of sort of all types and locations and technologies. And part of their initiative there, they were very interested in supporting energy efficiency and renewables, specifically on higher educational campuses. And I'm sure, as many in the audience know, you really can't go find those on the shelf anywhere. I mean, there aren't a lot of project opportunities to just go find certified carbon offsets from efficiency from Stanford campus, for instance. So that really got GM thinking and its advisory panel thinking that we should actually take this program a step further and open up that opportunity. And so just about a month ago, we published a first-of-its-kind methodology aimed at higher education and really commodifying their energy efficiency and sustainability gains, also any on-site renewable energy gains they've made, and turning that into an opportunity for universities to actually become sellers of carbon offsets to someone like Chevrolet, who's really interested in that story of not just meeting their carbon goal, but also being able to show how they influenced higher education and created these partnerships. And so it's a pretty interesting leadership role and becomes a legacy of the program. Now really any campus around the country can look at their gains and their sustainability performance and potentially sell greenhouse gas reductions from that, hopefully as a way to then fund the next project and take that even further towards their own goals. And so, that's been an interesting leadership position for Chevrolet. The other one I'll mention is the Change the Course campaign. So we're currently working with National Geographic and participant media with a platform to really influence individuals and organizations to look at their own water use. And so there's a water calculator and everything online where you can get tips, and we're asking people to make a pledge to say that I'll do such and such action to make sure I'm reducing my water footprint. And for that, we will guarantee 1,000 gallons on behalf of that pledge put back into the critically dewatered Colorado River. And as some may know, for the last 20 years, most of the Colorado River doesn't reach the sea anymore. It dries up before it gets there. This year, that's changing. As I'm speaking, there's a pulse flow being released to basically, sort of kickstart the delta in Mexico there at the Bay of California. So we want to take that even further and hopefully engage even more folks to take that pledge, and with the help of our underwriters such as Coca-Cola, Walt Disney, Patagonia, New Belgium Brewing, the National Hockey League, basically help get people engaged and thinking about their own impacts, but also showing real results in the environment through putting water back in Colorado.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'd like each of you to talk a little bit about the challenges of not only administering these programs, but launching them. And, what have you learned that can result in better efforts the next time around?
Do you want us to go in?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So, challenges, excuse me, or institutional barriers, they're always, it's sets of three: people, processes, and information. When universities, and I think this is a common symptom for any large research university, I guess that would cover Stanford and others, is these are older institutions. Stanford, for example, is 125 years old, and when they were set and put in place, sustainability wasn't a department. There were other, designed based on academic programs, which is the primary service of the institution, and then the operations that support those programs. As sustainability became more and more of a concern, an issue, a core value, or a criteria for decision, then you have to do this entire change management where this value all of a sudden has to be integrated and institutionalized in everything else that you do. And it then becomes a game of both a networking activity where you infuse the value in all these departments that already exist, and they should because they have their purpose, but then it also becomes sort of a back-end centralization process. So what I'm getting at is working in decentralized institutions, creating centralized programs. That is a very common challenge across all universities. And that's true for Stanford as well. And so you work with understanding how the business works and why certain departments are making sustainability decisions versus others, what are their motivators, and really getting back to the triple bottom line. I know it's cliche at this point, but it is about the environment, economy, and society, and especially in higher education, which many of them, whether it's public or private, almost all of them, by virtue nonprofits, they actually do care about that, whether they've thought about it through the lens of sustainability or not. So there's a lot of silver lining to the challenges that we have faced over the years, but there are very common trends across other universities, and that's true for our school as well.
I would echo a lot of that for working within the sports world. There's a lot of decentralization in how decisions are made. There is not consistency in who owns venues. Sometimes it's the team, sometimes it's more than one team from more than one league, sometimes it's a municipality. So trying to figure out ways to implement changes across an entire industry, in this case U.S. sports industry, is very challenging. You can't just create a template. And one thing I should mention is that our idea of greening and what we communicate with the folks we work with is that greening is an ongoing process of evaluating your operations and your supply chain with an eye toward making environmental improvements. So we emphasize with folks that it's really not a checklist. There aren't these 10 things you can do and then say, yay, we're green now. That it's really about integrating environmental considerations into ongoing decision making about products you buy and services you buy or products you provide or the service you provide. So it's inherently tough because we're essentially saying you're not just going to now think about cost and availability and quality, you're also going to think about environmental impact with every single decision you make. One of the things that I would say we've tried to do to address some of the challenge is to work top-down, starting with the leagues. So we started with each of the pro leagues saying, we'd like this to be, we'd like environmental sustainability to be a league initiative. And each of the commissioners' offices made a statement prioritizing sustainability in their league, which is great because when you've got this sort of decentralized structure in one stadium, you've got a facility manager who's in charge of most of the decision making that pertains to environmental initiatives. In another stadium, it's a handful of purchasers. In another, it's actually a team owner who's motivated. So you can, with the league down approach, we can disseminate tools. We created an online greening advisor, for example, that's free, greensports.org. Covers all varieties of issues. And so we could disseminate information like that throughout teams. And then we could work on building resources that folks could use so that we weren't having to go to each particular venue one by one. So I would say a couple other challenges. One is people are afraid to talk about what they're doing because they're afraid they're going to be accused of greenwashing. So part of what we'd try to do is emphasize that this is incremental and ongoing work. So it's okay to talk about a success that you've had. And it's okay to talk about your challenges, what's coming up for you, what you haven't been able to do yet, what you hope to do. And the NRDC will provide some language and context around that so that you don't feel afraid as an organization. And another thing is measurement, that folks haven't been measuring what they're doing. We went to Major League Baseball at one point and said, we'd really like it if you could start measuring your energy use, your water use, your waste. And they said, I don't know, that's kind of hard. And we said, you do realize you're baseball. You measure everything. You have numbers for things nobody else has even heard of. You know, oh, right. We love measuring stuff. Yes. So MLB was actually first out the gate with the pro leagues, getting going on a data measurement protocol for those environmental metrics. But integrating that kind of thinking into this is actually inherent into how you do business, and it can be, and it's not onerous. It really just becomes another part of who you are. I would say has been our biggest challenge, but also it's been very rewarding.
So I'd say a lot of the organizations that we work with have very similar challenges. It's tough to get to the right decision maker. Things are decentralized. But from a carbon perspective, I'll share some recent challenges. We find that a lot of the folks that work with us, and certainly General Motors included, are interested in something more than just sort of the carbon value of the offset. They want a story behind the project they're supporting. And so I would put a challenge to everybody here is when you're thinking about your carbon project, really position it to share all the other benefits that might be associated with it. You know, does it produce jobs? Is it supporting a new technology? Is there something distinct about this beyond just the carbon value? I think the market is really asking for this. And at this point, it's a challenge to find those really good, solid stories to share with folks.
What about cost issues? A lot of businesses that go into adopt the sustainability programs, you know, after a few years down the road, say that they're saving money. Yeah. And is this, you know, how hard is it to sell the idea that these programs can save you money?
It's hard if you make it hard. However, if you make it a criteria for everything you do, then it becomes part of practice. And I'll share a few examples here. When the big infrastructure projects happen, like a new energy plant or a new building, of course, the cost calculation is inherent because you have to start with a budget. And the example here is when our new science and engineering quad, Darby, you haven't seen it, when that was being conceptualized along the time of this whole focus on interdisciplinary education about a decade ago, the faculty and the professionals, the architects and the engineers, they really wanted this new center of this new quad to be with the highest green building standards possible. But the challenge posed to them by both the administration and others is like, first of all, can green buildings be just as functional as non-green buildings? And if they are, can they be priced at the same level? And if that's true, can they be as beautiful as the others that also exist? So it's sort of the three multi-pronged challenges, and cost was one of them. And through extensive life cycle cost analysis early on, the net present value and all of those kind of tools that Darby mentioned, the buy-in to those were so immediate, because once you make the business case and show that for the longevity of the infrastructure programs you build, this really is worth it to make that investment, then all the stakeholders and all the decentralization does converge to a central point of consensus. So business cases can and should be made. And it's commonplace for infrastructural projects. On the behavioral projects or other programs that are more short-lived or focused on human behavior or education and others, we make business cases for those too. And in order to do that, we have to set metrics in advance, both hard metrics as well as soft metrics, meaning qualitative ones. So whether it's going to actually save water, improve the recycling rate. In addition to that, we also pay attention to student morale, their overall enrichment or educational experience at Stanford, and all those play into the business cases that are made. So I think it's essential to make a business case. That's actually the right way to structure this, because that's also when a lot of the decisions, you are able to think about it much more in advance as opposed to doing incremental work towards sustainability. This has been happening a lot in our respective industries, is the whole notion of green and wanting to be sustainable. People have done a lot of knick-knack projects in a hurry just to be somewhere. But when you go through the business case process is when you bring in the rigor of metrics, really understanding the payback, both qualitative and quantitative payback is in my opinion, it's a really good process, and it becomes easier with time.
And I think that's a great point, is that visualizing an initiative as something that takes place over a long term keeps you from getting hung up on the short-term costs, allows you to make investments. There are actually at least 19 teams right now that have installed solar at their venue. That's big, and we're seeing that more and more as folks are able to take the long view and say, this is something that's not only the right thing to do, but it will actually save us money over time. Part of that cost issue for us was why to make this a top-down initiative in many ways, because if you are a purchaser who doesn't feel very empowered to make decisions about budgets, but you are told that this is an institutional priority, you have a little more authority to go investigate options that may cost a little more at the front end, but they may save money in the long run. So I would say that we also try to just say, let's contextualize cost in your overall operations. So if you are able to save a lot of paper through paper reduction, things like double siding and changing to electronic communications, you can maybe spend a little bit more of that budget on a higher recycled content paper, for example. And certainly we encourage, since it is ongoing, we say if you're just getting started, start with low-hanging fruit. Start with an energy audit, look where you can find opportunities to not use as much energy. Start with a waste audit, opportunities to recycle more. Often, increasing operational efficiency equals increasing financial efficiency equals increasing environmental efficiency. So there are ways where there are low-hanging fruit that get people confident and that save them money right up front. But it has been really important, I think, for us to try to make the business case. We put out 2 reports called Game Changer that are essentially case studies of sports venues that have adopted environmental initiatives that include details on what they've done, how they got started, what the challenges were, and wherever possible, figures on how much money they've saved, or not saved, but mostly saved. And part of the unique structure of sports, too, is that you can get money from different places, like sponsorships. So many of these sports teams are finding they now have opportunities to align with sponsors around green initiatives that serve PR purposes for both organizations and that advance agendas for both organizations. And those are sometimes new sponsorship opportunities that didn't exist until they entered the green space. So we're seeing that sort of exciting way of bringing more money specifically in to fund environmental initiatives.
For us on payback, I suppose if we could show payback on our sustainability initiatives, it would make my life a lot easier. Unfortunately, most of the things we work on are voluntary and sort of represent a premium. They're really above and beyond, things that, might be changing out equipment or, stuff with direct payback. Our initiatives really focus on things that are more reputational, more of a branding opportunity or marketing, payback, if you will. So I guess, I'm a little challenged by, being able to prove that to somebody. And if that's really what an organization is after, they're probably not talking to us at the right time. But if they're successful in that, we hope that they then have a budget to then take things a step further and really leverage what they're doing.
Patrick, why don't you talk a little bit about how the offsets work in? You've talked about how it might help a university, how it's working with the entertainment and sport venues.
So BEF, we support lots of different projects and things, and we're also an active marketer of offsets, as well as renewable energy certificates and the first of its kind water offset product. And so we've partnered with NRDC many times on helping to green jewel events, such as World Series or All-Star Games or things of that nature, even the Oscars. And so with that, basically, we help consult, calculating carbon footprint, and then, we, provide offsets from, a variety of different projects, really to deal with things, like the electricity use for the event, or maybe folks travel, to a game or things like that. And it's really to complement all of the other things, that's, sort of much more holistic from NRDC in terms of waste management and changing supply chain and those things.
But I would just add to that's exactly, we love that that BEF is playing that role and that other folks are playing that role, because we've had sports teams and venues come to us or other groups and say, we want to go green, we want to buy offsets, and that's how they start the conversation. And we always say, yes, we will have that conversation, but we're going to have a whole lot of other conversations before we circle back around to that. So that we don't want folks coming out the gate thinking they don't need to change anything, they just need to buy something. So we're really about, you're going to do as many footprint reductions as possible first, and that's going to benefit you in a number of ways. And then when we talk offsets, you're going to have a conversation that's much more meaningful where you have a better sense of where reductions are possible, where they're possible later but not now, and where you don't have any influence yet, and that's just energy you're consuming and you want to really be cognizant about it. So for us, the offset portion is part of being far more aware about your overall impacts in general and really targeting that to be a very meaningful step.
Yeah, same actually for our organization as well. Deep infrastructure changes and behavioral changes are what Stanford really wants to focus on first before deciding how the offsets should supplement the overall carbon reduction, is because once we get reliant on constantly look at options that are not necessarily within Stanford, we lose that opportunity of leading by example and educating the students who rely on us, wanting to see things that are happening on campus. So culturally, a lot of the organization, and it's true for many universities, especially us, is we want to reduce as much as possible our footprint from our energy, water, waste, from our processes, business decisions, procurement first, and offsets be a supplementary or a complementary tool to the overall story. And Pat mentioned this earlier, but it's really true that people want to see a special case of offset, something they know that, yes, we're purchasing this, but it is benefiting somebody, a community they care about, either locally that they know of or outside the boundaries of their visibility that they believe in. So those kind of special offset projects are what's really kind of in demand by larger organizations who focus in-house first, but then they want to bring in projects that supplement their values.
Okay, well, so we've seen how your program changed the course, is bringing water to Colorado. What I want to know is how your programs actually end up changing the behavior of students, academics, and for sports fans.
You want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, she's the sports expert. So behavior change in adults, it's the hardest thing. Children, they learn or they get accustomed to something almost naturally, and their surroundings is something that sets the example. Adults, behavioral studies researchers tell you that it takes 22 weeks of repeated behavior or something in order for it to be wired into your brain. Otherwise, it's a temporary fix that you're doing either to impress your peers or to keep a commitment to get that commission that your boss wants you to get. Those are not real. So you really have to practice in order for the behavior to become nature. So here are some of the things we're trying on campus, and this is the areas where we know we're succeeding. First, you have to fix sort of the information flow. Because we looked at incentives, for example, we've had programs on campus prior to sort of the sustainability era, like transportation demand management and others, where a lot of cash incentives or convenience type of tools were provided. But when we actually survey campus community, students, staff, and faculty about what really motivates behavior change, cash is not one of them. And it's not because it's a relatively affluent community, it's because people inherently want to be rewarded for their good call and for their altruism and for doing the right thing. So we have actually changed a lot of our behaviors. Instead of saying raffle prizes here or free iPad at the end of the 6-week intense recycling pledges that you take, is we recognize the people who do the work. We set up lunches with the executives that they would like to get to know better. And we recognize the team effort that they're putting on for many, many years. So the recognition of the fact that they've made an effort and changed the behavior seems to be the intangible that actually a campus community is after, particularly the students. So understanding what incentives actually work have helped shape a lot of our behavioral programs. And we're very much at the beginning stages of it, not suggesting that we've figured out the behavior nugget. But we are working with social scientists and psychologists and others to say, how do you design a program that catches their attention? So when we do dorm level competition, for example, on energy usage and set up smart meters and the dashboard so they can see where their behavior is going, typically at the end of the 2 months, it would tank down again after the pizza party, so to speak. But how do you retain that behavior is through recognition and monitoring. So we report the progress and we say, well, during your campaign, you did really well, but looks like Toyon Hall. You didn't. No. It looks like, it did fail. So we communicate in a way, keep them posted to get energized and see what tools are needed to retain behavior. So behavior change is a very deep area of investment. You not only have to align incentives, you have to align processes, you have to align metrics, and you have to align information, and repeat, and reward. All sorts of, it takes a lot of effort to really make behavior change. But we see that our student body knows about sustainability being a priority on campus. That myth has been taken care of. A decade ago, a lot of people were concerned that is Stanford University a sustainability-oriented campus. We see that our faculty want to work with operations closely together. There is trust that the operation is looking at sustainability the same way faculty is teaching about it in the classroom. And the other metric is honestly the third-party evaluations we go through. And within the higher education, there are a lot of assessments now in place. The California Higher Education Consortium, the National Consortium, and ASHE, where thousands of colleges and universities sign up. They have their very rigorous assessment tools. So kind of like the corporate social responsibility reporting, higher education actually has very extensive reporting and assessment that's keeping us honest and helping us look at areas that we never thought of before. long answer.
You know, clearly Stanford is doing a good job at propagating this mindset. I got my undergrad at Stanford, look what I'm doing now. So obviously you're just creating environmentalists. So, you know, for me, this comes back to the context for the sports work is really about sustainable communities, or whatever phrase you prefer right now. And to me, a community is some place where people live, work, and play. And there's maybe not been quite as much focus on the play part of that, which is what I think is one of the key things we're doing in the sports project, is taking these environmental messages and moving them into an area of fun. So that if you associate having recycling bins at your stadium with something that's pleasurable to you and that you're doing for leisure, that goes in a different place in your brain as to if you're compared to if you're at the office and somebody's telling you you have to implement this efficiency initiative because it's how we do business now. And to me, that's part of changing cultural mindset and cultural expectations. That part of our goal is people start to go to other places that they recreate and say, where is the recycling bin? Because they're now accustomed to seeing one where they go to watch sports teams, or, you know, a number of other different initiatives. So that is part of, to me, exactly why we're doing this work, is to get that mindset change. But the question of how you measure success, how you know you've been successful, again, that's why we're working with teams and leagues and venues to just implement measurement protocols and try to put that into place. And part of what's critical for us about that is not just getting the numbers on what have you recycled, what energy have you consumed, what water have you consumed, but linking that with, and what are the metrics we can give back to them about environmental impacts. So, you know, working with somebody like Bonneville that can say you reduced carbon emissions this much with your purchases. You saved X gallons of water through buying restoration certificates. That's a very important part of the metrics that we take back, so that they're able to contextualize and say, oh, okay, we're actually a good citizen. We're actually doing something positive for the world.
Darby, is there any communication with the fans in terms of, you know, at these events that announce some of the accomplishments in terms of carbon reduction or
there
waste
are
reduction?
some. Mostly the fans don't care when they're at a game, but they care other times when they're looking up information about their team online. We encourage teams to share that through social media, and we do encourage them to make it part of, if you've got a video board trivia contest, throw in some environmental. We've written up eco tips or eco questions for them based on their achievements that they can put out there. The Seattle Mariners, for example, have created a Kid Compost and Captain Plastic mascots that are part of the whole team experience, that when fans come, they interact with these mascots. They can get a free compost bin giveaway. They've even made compost from the organics they've collected at the stadium and given that to fans. So they're tying this back into fan giveaways, into communications to fans, into trivia games. It becomes part of all of that, so that it's really associated with the sort of actual fundamental sport itself.
So instead of a free cap, you get a bag of compost?
You get a bag of compost, yes. Or a compostable cap, possibly. Yes.
What about, do you have anything to add to this in terms of the...
I will give a quick plug. The Seattle Mariners have done a large-scale solar array and have linked that to our Solar Schools program, and they're about to host a solar car derby as part of a game day event, and so bringing in students who have designed little solar cars to basically race them. So it is a really nice fan interaction opportunity.
Okay. Another question I have for you is right now these are all voluntary programs. So what impact are regulatory programs like California's Cap and Trade program or any other state programs or even local programs going to eventually have on these voluntary initiatives? Will businesses move away from this because they're going to have to be investing in these regulatory programs, or will this continue?
You should get to start one.
Okay. We actually do think about this quite a bit, and really it comes down to looking at this as a spectrum. And so, you know, compliance is you know, rarely all or nothing, you know, kind of thing. And so we really see the role of the voluntary market to really complement compliance. And so if there are standards that you know, require you know, a 20% you know, level of compliance, then that leaves the 80% to take care of on the voluntary side. And so these things should really work hand in hand.
Yeah, and I would say that what we're seeing is organizations that are becoming more confident about their ability to tackle a wide breadth of complicated environmental initiatives that are confident about their role in that space and that are actually seeking opportunities for leadership at this point. So I would say that there are ways where, by adopting the voluntary initiatives, they're not only going to not be afraid of anything regulatory that they encounter, but that they're actually going to incorporate that into part of their messaging and their initiative that they're proud of.
Yeah, likewise, in the absence of regulatory environment, voluntary activities are completely necessary, and it's the right thing to do. When the legal environment becomes more defined, then either you choose to communicate some of the work that you've done in the past and contextualize it, but it actually motivates to do more. So in higher education or in campus setting, we often see that when something becomes legal, it's almost like, now that's the bottom line, now we have to exceed that. So it's sustainability is almost always about looking ahead, and if regulation kind of settle things down, but I think it's only going to further motivate what else is left to do, what else needs to be done. So, they complement one another, and there's an interplay between the two that's hopefully for the better of the society.
What about what happens when there's change at the top, change management? How difficult is it to maintain these programs when that occurs? I know you mentioned the GM program is coming to an end, but you're not sure how that's going to evolve.
So the GM program was initiated in 2010, and since then there's been lots of changeover at GM, and specifically with the Chevrolet brand. And so we worked with some very passionate folks, but in essence, this wasn't their idea. They have inherited this. And it is sort of a question mark. Will they, renew this and take it further, based on sort of a very large commitment and significant budget? I mean, for us, it's a $40 million question to see if they'll do this again. But it's sort of an unknown. So I think some of this depends on the results they get out of it. Do they feel like it sort of changed the impact and position of their brand?
Yeah, I think that's a key point, is having results you can report back to show what the organization's gaining. And for us, it's key to why we say we're starting at the top, but we're working on with the people on the ground. We're integrating this into all aspects of the initiative. If you have one environmental champion in an organization, whether that's a purchaser or a CEO, and that champion leaves and you have not integrated the environmental way of doing business into the organization, you often see a just dramatic change and a loss. So we've seen that happen, and one of our first goals when we're starting to work with folks is to make it systemic. And that's, again, one of the particularly nice things about working with sports across an industry is that you've got players that are in common. You've got 6 concessionaires that handle almost all of Major League Baseball, for example. So if a team changes ownership, that's not going to affect what we've been doing with Aramark, which is now a separate organization that is able to still make these offerings. So it's something that we're embedding not only in that organization, but in the industry and in the supply chain for the industry, so that we can really have a lot of security if some of those players start moving around. And the other thing I would say that's unique to sports is that we don't have to foster any sense of competition. It's there. So we can say, we'll just let you know that the San Francisco Giants are recycling 90% now, and then the Mariners will say, well, why am I only at 85? I'm going to do better than the Giants. I got to beat the Giants. So there's a way where the nature of sports creates a competitiveness that extends to this environmental initiative that is going to survive different people coming and going.
It is so true for us. So, Stanford's a very competitive school itself, and within the peer institutions, there's a lot of friendly rivalry. And this is where the process trumps leadership in so many ways, is once sustainability is institutionalized, it is a core value, it's reported publicly, the ranks are something that students, faculty, and staff are paying attention to. Whether leadership, that changes or their priorities shift a little bit, it actually almost doesn't matter. And this is one of the cases where actually a decentralized institution is a good thing, because leadership changes happen for reasons that may or may not affect the core values that are already running through the organization. So the process of really integrating sustainability is fundamental. And with each generation, it just gets better and better. And evaluations play a big role in making sure that even if there's change in leadership, this is just something we will always do no matter what. But the competition really helps, and it's natural. It's what fuels innovation and the ability to do more.
Okay, well, I have one more question before we see if anyone else wants any. Where do you see these programs going from here in terms of trying to implement change beyond your boundaries or the sports boundaries?
Well, for me, I think, again, we have this three-pronged approach where change is happening on the ground, it happens with our outreach to fans, and it happens up the supply chain. And now that a bunch of organizations, teams, and venues have implemented initiatives and gotten the low-hanging fruit, and they're interested in moving forward in a couple of I think, very exciting ways. One is, how do you engage the fan more? How do you tackle what is probably the biggest carbon piece for most sports teams, which is fan travel? How do you tackle some of those harder to influence levels about where their greater footprint is and where their greater messaging opportunity is? How do they also become advocates so that they're not just saying, we'd like to have this a food option in our own venue, but we'd like to extend it beyond. We'd like to, composting is a great example. A lot of teams are saying we've done a really great job on recycling, but we see now that organics are what's left in our waste stream. What are we going to do about that? If there's not a composting infrastructure, can we help build one? So I'm seeing these organizations actually start to take leadership roles in moving infrastructure and in working with municipalities and working with suppliers and working with fans to try to make sure that their environmental work doesn't just confine itself to the boundaries of a stadium.
I'll go back to your original question to answer this one is the impact of what we do on public service and behavior change. So if we are doing a good job and students are seeing while they're living on campus what they're learning in classroom is consistent with where they're living, the values are aligned, and what they see, what they buy, what they eat, what they learn, it's that part of who they are, so they will choose sustainability-related career. They will be able to make a connection between what their hobbies and passions are to how they can turn that into a career option. So for us, that's really the value proposition, and always the thing to look forward to is that how do we shape their minds now so once they leave Stanford University, they are making a difference in the society.
And so for us, I think we certainly have lofty goals of solving all these environmental issues, but sort of taking it a step down. I think some of our major goals are to engage classrooms all over the country with renewable energy to inform the next generation of energy consumers. But I think more than anything, we're really interested in having our partners and clients and sort of everybody that we work with and represent recognized for what they're doing in ways that inspire and sort of leverage that into the next person, organization acting and getting involved as well.
Okay, well, thanks. Do we have any questions? Wendy.
Good morning, Wendy James, Better World Group. I just wonder if any of you saw any geographic differences. For example, if organizations in more conservative parts of the country were less likely to adopt more visible actions than places in, say, more progressive parts of the country.
Good question.
I think that's a good question. Certainly, when we founded the Green Sports Alliance, we founded it in the Pacific Northwest. The initial member teams were teams that were along the Pacific Northwest that primarily had initiatives because they had access to resources that were regional. So it's easy to recycle if you've got recycling in your city. It's not easy to recycle if you have inferior or no recycling in your city. So there's a certain amount of infrastructure municipally that absolutely is affecting who can get started on what initiatives when, but it doesn't seem to influence the motivation. And so if you have somebody who's motivated in an area that doesn't have a lot of infrastructure, we're working with the Cleveland Indians. They have installed wind turbines in their facility. That's not maybe the first place you would think of as doing cutting edge energy work, but because that stadium is interested in doing environmental work, they've figured out how to make it possible. I think we're seeing that with sports, they are key enough players that they can influence, but they've got to work a little bit harder. Again, though, since we're working with comprehensive initiatives, they can adopt things that maybe are easier in their region. So I think we started out seeing something regional when we said what's already in place, but once we created a national becoming international kind of sports movement with people talking to one another, we see that the interest is everywhere. It's all around the whole country.
I would really echo that as well. I mean, we certainly, first targeted all the likely places, the Austin, Texas, Boulder, Colorado, San Francisco, those types of places. But again, we find that people are pretty motivated across the country to address environmental issues that are both passionate and local to them. So there's opportunities everywhere.
Another question?
Yes, Tim Tutt from SMUD. And what I was going to say is Stanford and professional sports are very diverse organizations with views all over the place, I presume. And so I'm wondering if you've dealt with any opposition to these initiatives, and that opposition is often candy to the media. And so how have you handled that kind of issue? Thank you.
So on campus, I'll take the campus route. Universities, by definition, are agnostic to a lot of the political views or regional views, because it's supposed to be an area where people from all over the world come and learn, and they learn the subjects that they are passionate about. And over time, students experience how to make sense of it all and find their calling and vocation. Oppositions we see to sustainability are never really about what we're doing or the investments that are being made or the metrics we want to achieve. There's never any opposition to doing good. There is opposition, however, when there's a project that's particularly complex and then there are neighborhood issues, or the sense that not enough stakeholder opinion is being gathered. So it becomes often a communication and public relations management. But we have, at least in my tenure in my campus and what I've seen in other universities, they're actually almost, people are almost in violent agreement with each other. They actually want to agree because they care. They just want to be heard, and they want to know how what they already do will not be negated by what's being proposed. So I'm an eternal optimist. I always really think it comes down to communication and understanding value propositions and being able to explain how sustainability is broad enough of a topic where there is actually a story in it for everything. And as long as your values are aligned to the benefit of the society, whether you're profit-based or non-profit-based, community-based or not, if you agree to come together, engage in conversations early on about projects you want to do, and hear everyone out, a lot of those tensions dissipate. So we try to pay attention to that, but often there are, of course, misunderstandings along those edges, but never on the big good stuff that we do. Those are usually like, thank you. We're glad you took care of it.
I'm totally stealing the phrase violent agreement after this. I love that. So that distracted me for a moment, but I think I remember when it's about opposition. I would say that one of the very interesting things for me about working with sports is that it's a non-traditional ally for environmental organizations, and that we have often found ourselves aligning with organizations that in some ways define their mission as progressive or liberal or lefty. NRDC itself is nonpartisan, but that's where a lot of our audiences have been and a lot of our work has been. With sports, we're not using politics to accomplish our goals. We're really making this part of a way of doing business and talking about business goals. If it's not going to work for profits, it's not going to work ultimately. And that's sustainability has to keep that triple bottom line in mind, has to keep the organizational goals in mind. And we can accomplish so much without ever mentioning policy or politics in that realm. So we have other tools and other parts of NRDC where that's where we're focusing. Other parts of my job, that's where I'm focusing, but not with the sports work. And I think that it's actually a very powerful way for us to experience articulating our sustainability goals outside the realm of policy, on the ground practical solutions that actually are still very much about companies and organizations being motivated to be good citizens. Major League Baseball is very proud of its role as having hired African American players. Before that was something that the rest of the country took for granted, as that, of course, you're going to do that. They're also very proud of their role as environmental stewards, and they see themselves as having a cultural and social obligation to play that role. And to take that outside of political, I think, has reduced a lot of where the opposition would have come from, and we've seen nothing but enthusiasm, really, from all the different aspects.
Hi, Jeff Dacre, Southern California Gas Company. Question for Darby. Any movement on the non-major sports like NASCAR or golf for water stuff?
Yes, absolutely. We, in fact, have just started meeting with NASCAR. They have the largest array of solar panels of any professional sports facility. They have some really aggressive and interesting initiatives that we're just starting to partner with. We're going to help them figure out recycling, which is not something that has been traditionally a huge part of the track. But yeah, there is absolutely movement there. We've started working with college campuses. We're looking at ways to get involved with other kinds of sport. Other folks work on things like the Olympics that NRDC hasn't been as directly involved in. But it is all starting to connect up, and people are starting to share tools, join the Green Sports Alliance, learn from other teams and other venues. So some of those pro sports lessons are really propagating, I think, into those other kinds of sports.
Is there a greening at the golf?
A golf green, as it were?
Green, yeah.
Yeah, they have some of their initiatives. We have not been working with them as closely as with some of the other folks, but they are trying. They have some initiatives that they're hopefully going to build on.
Any other questions? No? Well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.